All right, so we're back here on a special edition of Couch Coach Live tonight. So we got a special guest in the building. We're going to be previewing high school football in the Richmond region. I got my guy, most definitely Danny Lewis from VirginiaPreps.com. What's going on, Danny?
It's Christmas for us high school football fans. We've been waiting on this since last December, and we got some football coming up this Thursday and Friday.
Yes, the time is here, most definitely. Especially in this area, it's one of the best times. We really don't necessarily have a professional team in this area, so high school football is by far the highlight, especially in this region as far as it goes. But yeah, so also you're talking about Virginia Preps writer, and also Springer 2. The co-author of that book as well. So we're definitely so what we're gonna do with preview this upcoming football season in the Richmond, Virginia area. So we'll talk about essentially some quarterbacks that's been on the radar, some players to watch. We'll also talk about some Class 5 contenders, sleepers, and then we also want to pick your brain. Who was especially during your career, who has been your top 5 RVA prep football players. So what we're going to do, we're going to kick that intro, and we'll be right back, and we'll start the high school football preview.
Okay.
And we definitely like that. And we got our special guest. Yes, indeed. We like that. And we got our special guest here, Danny Lewis from VirginiaPreps.com. So we're going to kick off our 2023 RVA high school football preview. So, Danny, obviously we know you've been a writer for Virginia Preps for over a decade now. I just want to, before we get into the preview, pretty much just like how you got into like covering high school football, then also just who has been like your influences, during, as far as just your career in general, as far as covering high school football?
So, very weird start to how I got into this. I first took an interest in high school football my senior year at Verona. That 1995 team that faced C.D. Hilton in the state semifinals, that was my class. So, I went to games to watch my classmates play, and, it was a great ride. And then, I went off to college and didn't think twice about high school football until, I got brokenhearted by a girl of all things. I'm trying to find an escape, and my dad still went to games, and he says, why don't we go to a football game? So went to Verona's football game, and I think that was around 97. And, it took off from there. I was at Verona games every Friday night. Was there for the 98 and 99 seasons that were heartbreaking. And then over time, just 2001 came about. I'm looking online for resources to learn more about teams, and I stumbled upon this website called Virginia Preps. I started just as a fan on the message boards, going at it with other fans like any fan does. And over time, I was asked to be a contributor. Now, I wasn't a staff member at that time. I was just a fan that would go to games and write about it. And, that's how it started. And then over time, in 2012, Tom Garrett was stepping down. He had done it for 12 years, and he was stepping down. They were looking for somebody, and they asked me. I, gave it some thought. I was like, can I juggle being a father and a 9-to-5 job and do this? And I'm like, well, I'm going to go to games regardless. So I might as well have fun and, do something with it. And that's how we got to this point. As far as influences, it has to be my father. He's the one that got me back into high school football. He played JV at Verona back in the 70s. He was never varsity. Interesting little story. Back in 2007, Verona had a loss against somebody, and, typical, quarterback couch, coach, you think you know more than the coach. And I emailed Chilcote and I just let him have it. I'm like, what are y'all doing? And coach wrote me back. He said, why don't you stop by the field sometime and just get an idea of what we do and the work that we put in to even have a game on Friday night. And I said, okay, I'll go see what he has to say. And it changed my perspective completely. I went from being just a fan, to understanding coaches and just everything that goes into preparing for one game a week.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, hey, you're on Couch Coach Live, so that is, it's definitely perfect when it comes to that. I definitely know the feeling of that. And it's funny, we look at, especially in the Richmond region, and it's funny that you talked about like the days, 98, 99, you look at the quarterbacks like Michael Robinson at the time, one of the most prolific quarterbacks in this area during that time. And now you're looking at, we have a set of two quarterbacks that's pretty much are just doing their thing. You look at what Harry Dalton is doing at Dinwiddie, and he's like the talk of the town, and also Khristian Martin, and with Harry Dalton just being coming in, he's a junior.
Yeah.
This coming season. And then you got Khristian Martin from Howland Springs, who's committed to Maryland. Now he's a senior. So just your thoughts on these two quarterbacks.
I've seen him play a lot, obviously. Khristian is that traditional. I mean, I know he can get it done with his legs. He had, I forget how many touchdown runs he had last year, but it pales in comparison to what he did throwing the ball. And he reminds me of that more of a pocket passer. That's what his go-to is. Dalton is the complete opposite. I mean, you don't know what he's going to do with that ball. He keeps you guessing. I mean, and I saw multiple times last season where I thought he'd be wrapped up, and then there he goes down the field. It's like, how's he doing this? And one of the best comparisons, and you mentioned the name, is Michael Robinson. I mean, Michael Robinson earned the name Superman back then. Harry Dalton is just like him. He's elusive. He can throw the ball. I had my doubts going into last year when he made the switch from running back to quarterback. I'm going, oh, how is this going to work out? Well, it worked out pretty well for Dinwiddie. So they are great players. They got big futures ahead of them. Khristian obviously is headed to Maryland after this year. Dalton is just starting to really scratch the surface of the offers, and they're already pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's very impressive what he's done so far. We talked about the quarterbacks, now kind of the shifting the focus on the non-QBs. So is there any players that we should watch for in this region?
Yes. So, you sent me that email and you said, hey, let's talk about some players to watch. I ended up with a list of about 60 players. Because I really think in the Richmond area, having been around high school football since the late 90s, I don't recall a time where there's been so much talent in this region. I think of guys, at Thomas Dale, there's a wide receiver, defensive back Shamari Earls. He's just a Let me double check that. Yeah, just a junior. And he's got almost a dozen offers, and not from, small schools. I'm talking Michigan State. So, you've got a player like that who is a relative unknown because, you've got names at Thomas Dale like Ethan Minner, Nick Tyree, and then all of a sudden Shamari Earls is just climbing up the charts. You've got, Raphael Tucker at Dinwiddie. I don't think he gets as much recognition as he should. Dalton's, gets all the glitz and the, write-ups, but Tucker had a phenomenal season last year, and he's back. And those two, again, they might as well lead Dinwiddie back to a championship. I mean, I certainly think they could be playing Phoebus in the region semifinals. You got a couple of wide receivers to mention down in Matoaka. Bryce Yates, Dylan Newton-Short, both juniors. They've got a senior quarterback, Riley Justice, tossing to them. They had a good season last year, and they're back this year. The trio is Dylan Newton-Short was a phenomenal basketball player this past season, and, you've got two guys that can go up and get the ball. They could make some noise. They're kind of I know we're going to get the teams here in a minute, but Matoaka is one of them teams that I've closely regarded as a team that could be a sleeper, could be contender. I'm not sure which. Holland Springs, I mean, where do you can name the entire team, to be quite honest. Khristian, obviously, Jakir Henley. I mean, that boy is a playmaker. He return man, receiver, running back. He can throw the ball. I mean, he's a Swiss Army knife as far as I'm concerned. There's one name I'll throw at you that's he might be known, but I don't know that he's known widely, and that's Tay Gilpin. He played at Atlee the past couple of years. He's now at Verona. He's part of a deep wide receiving core. They've got a quarterback at Verona this year, Linwood Johnson, who I've seen him in practice. Strong arm. I think that could be interesting. I think Verona could stretch the field with the number of receivers they have. So Tay Gilpin's one of them I'd keep my eye on. Trying to think of guys that aren't receivers. Hanover, Peyton Seelman had a solid season going last year. Had an injury that sidelined him for a bit. He's back for his senior season. Plus, they got this other kid, Jalen Copeland, who's a junior. He was solid last year. So there's just so many different players. You got, Huguenot, like Holland Springs. What Charles Scott is doing over there on Huguenot to resurrect that program with kids from Life Christian, kids from other schools around the area, that's like an all-star team right there. I'm interested to see them this week when I go there Friday night. And then you got your Manchester guys, Devin Bryant, Kyrie Richardson, Makai Byerson. These guys are all playmakers. They're going to be guys to watch. It's so many names. I could go on and on.
Yeah. Hey, and that, like you said, you look at now, and it's funny that, you talk about, you've been following since the late 90s. You just look at just like the talent in this area is so rich compared to, and we had, there were talented guys, at the turn of the century or whatever, but now, like you said, it is such a rich talent pool now in this area. So definitely, yeah, like you said, he said your list was at 60. I understand that, yeah, because there's a lot of guys that are extremely talented in this area.
Yeah, I feel bad not mentioning some guys, but I mean, we only got how much time, I could be here all night listing guys.
Right. And so let's see. So, and one of the biggest storylines in with high school football this year, Highland Springs moved into Class 6. So now, you look at how Highland Springs pretty much had a stranglehold in Class 5. So now, as they transition to Class 6, what are some teams that we really need to look as far as contenders in Class 5s? As far as who you got?
So that's interesting because you're right. Highland Springs has more or less ruled Class 5. Maury and Stonebridge, they got state titles over the last few years, but 5 out of the last 8 state champions were Highland Springs. So now they're gone to Class 6, and a lot of people in Class 5 are probably praying, thanking the Lord for moving them up. I don't know if there's one team from our region because we're going to butt heads with Stonebridge in the semifinals more than likely. I don't know if we have that team that can beat a Stonebridge. So it's hard for me to say this team is going to be playing in a state championship in Charlottesville, but we do have a wide open region 5C because of Highland Springs moving up. Plus, you've got schools from Roanoke that are now in the region, plus Louisa. So coming into this season, coming into the off season, I kept thinking Bird. It was Bird. They had quality running backs. They had a bunch of guys on defense returning. And then things took a turn for Bird because one of their running backs transferred. There's one of their best defensive players, Xavier Carpenter. He got injured in camp. He won't be playing this season. So now I'm kind of backing off of Bird. I'm going, well, let's see what they look like this week against James River before I go all in. So then I'm looking at a team like Matoaka, who I mentioned. They return just about everybody. They've got like 8 guys back on offense, 7 guys back on defense. They have experience. This is the second year under Coach Stutes. They were in 4B last year. Well, 4B was a juggernaut. Now they're in a wide open 5C. I'm saying, why not Matoaka? I'm looking at Douglas Freeman. They are one of the deepest teams in the region. I was looking at their roster, and it just goes on for days. So those 3 from Richmond are the ones that I'm looking at. Freeman, Matoaka, Bird. One of them could win the region for sure. The only problem is you might have, and I don't know these other schools, Louisa or the schools from Roanoke, but from what I've been told, Patrick Henry Roanoke is supposed to be really good. So they could be a team that stands in the way of one of our guys, but it wouldn't surprise me if Matoaka, Freeman, or Bird are playing Stonebridge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, kind of the little sidebar. And I remember when Highland Springs went to Class 5, and I remember, I'm a Spring alum, and I kept on saying, "Oh, there's no way we're gonna get out of 5," because at the time that's when Bird was a juggernaut, Hermitage was a juggernaut, and it's fun to think like how that has changed. And I remember I was like, "Oh, that's so unfair. Like they can't put us in that same district." Like, but it's funny how that has changed. But absolutely. So, and it's just as far as in this Richmond area, who do you see like in this, like talking about outside of Class like 5 or what have any teams in this area that as far as that are like sleepers, like teams that we can watch, not necessarily they'll be practicing Thanksgiving morning, but they could, they'll be in the playoffs or in contention or what have you. So in the regional sleepers that you got.
Yeah, so I've got a couple. So, I wouldn't ever call Manchester a sleeper because they are one of those powers, but they are a team, with Highland Springs moving up to Class 6, Manchester and Thomas Dale are no longer the class of 6A in our region. Highland Springs takes top dog in that region now. So both of those could come up and do something, especially if they get Highland Springs at their house. Thomas Dale played Highland Springs recently in a scrimmage and played them as hard as anybody has recently. In Region 5C, we were talking Bird, Freeman, Matoaka. One that I've kind of been on the fence about is James River. They are another team with a young quarterback. He's a junior, Nelson Lane. They got a senior running back, Will, I hope I pronounced his name right, Managabanag. Probably butchered that. But and they've got just a bunch of young players who saw time last year. And I think now that they've dropped from Class 6 to Region 5C, I look at them as one of those teams that might break into that region and make some noise in November. Colonial Heights, they put together a solid season last year. They've got a lot of their pieces back, quarterback, Zamarian Mason. They got Kenyez Mungro back, who's just a phenomenal player. You don't think of Colonial Heights as a playoff threat, but they were 6-4 last year. This is year 3 or 4 under Keeler, and I think they're just steadily climbing. You never sleep on Hopewell. They've got Keyshawn Henderson. They're breaking in a new quarterback, but Coach Irby is a whale of a coach, and you can never sleep on them. And then there's Thomas Jefferson, who is in Region 3B this year. They moved up from Class 2, and that's another well-coached team. Granted, they have a new coach, Eric Harris, this year, but he was there last year as an offensive coordinator. A lot of experience coming back, and they always seem to run against a better team in 2A. In 3B, they might make some noise. And one more for you, and again, maybe not a sleeper considering the level of talent there, but Huguenot. Been a lot of chatter about Huguenot, about the building of this program, but if they can get to 5-5, 6-4, they're solidly in the Region 4B playoffs and maybe upset somebody like a Dinwiddie or a Verona.
Absolutely. So, and it's funny, I'm always curious because everybody I've had on in past, because everybody's different eras. I've had guys talk about high school football from the 2000s perspective, 90s perspective, and what have you. So I always gotta ask everybody, who are their top 5 RVA football players of all time? Definitely want to hear yours.
Okay, so this one, you really got me doing some homework when I got your email, because it's like, holy smokes, I got to look up some, because I know some names, obviously, and then you're measuring it. Are you measuring it by what they did after their time here in RVA, or is it just based on what they've done at the high school level? Years ago, Gary Hess, the voice of high school football, he put together a top 25. It was right around the time that Russell Wilson was just coming into the league. He listed a bunch of guys, Barty Smith, Willie Lanier, Ken Willard, a Verona guy, Robinson. And then I had to start thinking about guys that have been more recent that I've seen. One name that just I didn't even have to give it any thought. The story's not completely written yet, but Trey Henderson at Ohio State played at Hopewell. He could be one of those top 5 if nothing sidelines his career, injuries or anything. He could be one of those guys that we're talking about 10, 15 years from now as a top 5 player from Richmond. Greg Dortch, he had a phenomenal career at Holland Springs, Wake Forest. He's caught fire in Arizona. Sam Rogers, I saw him a lot at Hanover. Now he's back at his alma mater coaching, but a lot of teams struggled to bring that boy down. I mean, Dinwiddie, the Dinwiddie Hanover fights were just some great playoff games. Obviously Michael Robinson, Makai Becton at Holland Springs, one of the biggest football players I've ever seen. I know I'm not tall, but I felt like a micro machine standing next to him. Morgan Moses, Meadowbrook. He's had a good NFL career. I don't know, I'd say great, but a good NFL career. But he did well at Meadowbrook. I think of Anthony Harris, played at LC Bird. He's, made it through into the NFL, was exceptional at UVA. Those are just some of the names that I thought of most recently. Brendan Clark, his collegiate career didn't pan out the way we'd hoped, but he was one of the best quarterbacks that I've ever seen in 2018.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you bring up Sam Rodgers, and it's funny. The thing Sam Rodgers makes me feel old when I think about college, when I think about high school football, because I remember catching him in the late 2000s when he used to be a thorn on Highland Springs side. Go to Hanover sometimes and go to Highland Springs. And he used to do his thing, and now he's the head coach, and he's been there for a few years now. So it's kind of one that's like, dang, I'm old. Like, it make you feel.
I go through the same thing when I saw that he got the job a few years ago. It's like, how is this even possible?
Right. I know, right? And that's why I was like, wow, and like he's the one that all now you're looking at some of the guys coming back, especially like seeing Marcus Lewis, even though we're like literally the same age. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But
right.
Sam Rodgers is like, no, there's no way. Like,
yeah, we were adults when he was still playing high school football.
Right.
Like, how is this even possible?
Right. We were grown men, established men, and like, how is this possible? Right.
What I'm waiting for, people always ask me, how long are you going to do this for? And I'm like, I don't know. I love it until I guess I can't walk on the sidelines. I don't know. But then I thought one day I was like, what's probably going to be the telltale sign that it's time to get out is when the son of a player I covered starts playing. Like, that's going to be, hey, you're too old for this now.
Right. I know, man. It's something else, man. It's always a trip seeing that these type of things happening, especially, like with, high school football. And it's funny, like you talked about how you got started. I think obviously I started pretty much following high school football my freshman year in high school in 1998. So it's been on now, I think that's like 25 years ago. So now, like you said, and then seeing, the tide of that. And like you said, so many great, just from a historical standpoint, just, how many players have came through this area. And like you said, in the list, in the top five, it's so hard to kind of narrow down because there's so many guys that came through this area.
And to that point, I thought about one as we're talking. Kayvon Wallace played in the Super Bowl last year from Highland Springs.
Yeah.
Played at Clemson.
Yep. And it's something. Yeah, that's one thing where you just, God, it's just you. And I know. And it's like narrowing it down is the toughest. But yeah, it's, yes, indeed. But
I don't think anybody could, 10 people would put together a top five and none of them would look close to the same.
Yeah, and that's one thing too. And I enjoy this type of exercise because it's errors. Like, because I had a guy last year that we were talking to last year. I think he graduated like in maybe like 2010, 2011. So his list is definitely different than somebody like of your you've been pretty much for 20 plus years far as covering, not covering, but more so just being a fan of it. So. The list is different. Like, so, the guys of yesteryear, that wouldn't necessarily he would have on his list compared to others. And like if other guests as well. And it's always a diverse list, but it just shows you how good this area is as far as talent wise.
Yeah. And the thing about a list, I listen to a lot of sports radio and, they're always talking to the greatest basketball players of all time.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do you compare this era to that era? It's like looking at this list that Gary Hess made a few years ago, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, where would I put Trey Henderson at in here? And where, how does he compare to Willie Lanier? Or, it's hard to compare that sort of thing. So I really do think you have to do it probably in eras, every 20 years, who was the greatest of this particular period of time.
And I think he even go decade wise.
You might have to.
Yeah. Because
especially currently with as much talent as starting to filter through Richmond, like good luck in 25 years when somebody's trying to figure it out.
Right. Because if you have a list like that, like you said, it would definitely be, and like you said, and we talked about, Khristian Martin and Harry Dalton earlier. They could, especially Harry Dalton, could definitely be on a list, especially with him. He's only had 2 years. So just imagine what his junior, senior year going to be. He's on a trajectory to possibly be one of the best quarterbacks in this area. So do you give, like you said, like in a perfect example, like does that like kind of get rid of kind of what Michael Robinson did in the 90s and the turn of the century? No. But so that's like you said, the list is like you said, it's got to be by eras. And I think, like you said, maybe a decade or so, as far as separated. But yeah, it's definitely a very interesting list. Like you said, and everybody's different. I think that's what I love about it all.
Yeah, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, let's say Harry wins another state championship, either this year or next, and goes on and has a great collegiate career. Well, suddenly this phenomenal career that Trey Henderson had at Hopewell and now Ohio State maybe doesn't look as impressive compared to, say, Harry Dalton, So it makes it fun. I mean, this is the type of thing that I know you do a lot. You're talking with friends, you're talking with other people in the football community, and you can have these conversations for days.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll put a bow on this high school football preview. Dad, tell me where they can find you on social media and then any upcoming things that's going on.
All right. Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active other than on the website, virginiapreps.com. But my Twitter feed is at CRF, the number 4, Dan, DAN. I'm always posting, little nuggets. That's one of my things I do during the season is, little stats that people don't pick up on. Obviously recaps of the week. We do players of the week. So, if you're not on the website, check out Twitter because you will definitely see everything you need to see.
Absolutely.
As far as what's coming up, it's football time. I got 2 games this week. I couldn't be more jacked. I hope they're both good. I'm going to Bird and James River Thursday. I'm going to Huguenot and TJ on Friday.
Nice. Yeah, man. Once again, definitely appreciate you, Dan, for coming on and talking some high school football with us. And I'm definitely once again appreciate you taking your time, especially on a busy week that this is. So appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun.
Yes, indeed. And with that being said, this concludes our 2023 RVA High School Football Preview. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. And we're out.